Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint by Sing Shong. Chapter 264. Doctor's Story. Part 1. The fourth bookmark. The exclusive skill Way of the Wind LV11+1 is activated. I avoided the flying sting of the scorpion goddess. If the strength of her body hadn't been suppressed, the poison would have vaporized the whole area. However, it was fine since I had Way of the Wind. I stepped on the melted gorge and released the white pure star energy. My sword cut the bandages of the last pharaoh. The moment my sword hit the bandages, there was the sound of a drum beat. King Oedipus didn't miss this gap and flew forward. The exclusive skill Beast King Sensitivity LV10+1 has been activated. Normally, this was an impossible fight. Originally, only one bookmark could be used at a time. The effect of Looked into the Abyss has improved all your skills. Currently, 2 bookmarks are being used at the same time. The duration of bookmark is reduced by half. All my skills had improved since the last time I checked my attributes window. The 5th bookmark. The exclusive skill Electrification LV12+2 has been activated. I became smaller through miniaturization. Then I turned into a point of light and penetrated the torso of the last pharaoh. The last pharaoh suffered a fatal wound and collapsed to the ground with a scream. I was fighting with the history I had built up. The things I read. The times I had lived. Everything that I had. How many more flashes of light were seen and how much blood was spilled? King Oedipus opened his mouth and spoke in a slightly weary tone. Great, Demon King of Salvation. Honestly, I didn't think you would be this strong. Nevertheless, there wasn't a look of defeat on his face. Shadows flocked to the top of the gorge. They were the other constellations belonging to Meladon and Burkan. Duke Burkan. Mysterious Bird of the Nile. Supreme God of Light. The number of constellations that appeared was close to 10. They looked down here from the high cliff of the gorge. I was stifled by the presence of the constellations, but I didn't back down. Are you just going to watch from there? Rather, I raised the status that was sleeping inside me. I was also a constellation. I didn't lose to them in terms of status. Some of the constellations were crushed by the status I released and stumbled back. However, it wasn't everyone. You're an interesting child. All of a sudden, some of the constellations on top of the canyon bowed and retreated. Someone was approaching from among the constellations. His long, golden hair waved every time he took a step and his 4 arms drew a beautiful rainbow. The third eye on his forehead looked down here, like the sun coming out. Mitra was trying to get his own holiday off, so I was wondering what type of person you were. His blinding appearance made his modifier obvious. The Supreme God of Light. I even knew his true name. Surya. Dazzling sparks appeared when I mentioned his real name. It was a sight that attested to the status of the name. Kid, do you know my name? I know. The Nebula Vedas had 8 great locapula. They were the guardians of the 8 cardinal directions, including north, south, east and west. Surya of the southwest. Surya was one of the 8 locapula. The constellation mass production maker is frowning. The constellation goddess of love and beauty is accusing the supreme god of light. The constellation queen of the darkest spring is pointing out that this behavior doesn't fit the status of the supreme god of light. He was a powerful being equal to the 12 gods of Olympus. This presence was staring at me. If so, you know that you can't win this game. The status of over 1,000 years emerged from his body and I suppressed the desire to step back. He wasn't a constellation I could fight against. Locapula Surya was different from King Oedipus and Cleopatra, who were humans that became constellations. Come to Vedas. You will die even if you win this game. I don't want to. You don't know the world that will appear after the giant story. Do you think you can stand against that power alone? It isn't a story that only one star can afford. I knew what he was saying. Perhaps the world that Surya saw was different from the world that I saw. Just by obtaining a single giant story, the level of the world that the constellation could perceive was entirely different. Nope, I can afford it. I'm not alone. The possibility of a new story is germinated. The 73rd demon realm wriggled as if in response to my words. Surya felt the vibrations and said, "You aren't alone, how funny. Who is with you now?" A person who is more familiar with the cause and effect law than anyone else is saying this. It is truly ridiculous. A powerful storm started to flow from Surya's incarnation body. The constellations around him turned pale. Still, he couldn't exercise all his power in this game, no matter his status. Sparks burst out in a dazzling manner. In this game, Meladin had won 2 points. These 2 points might be able to free one of Surya's stigmas. I couldn't let that happen. As I moved, the constellations blocked my way. A fist, containing the power of electrification, struck the face of the constellations. The broken heart of a young gold dragon repeatedly pumped and created a massive amount of magic power. I didn't hesitate to release this strength. A little more, just a bit more. I had to draw my magic power to the limits. The constellations couldn't cope with the power of electrification and fell down while bleeding. It was a transcendent power that could even destroy constellations. The white lightning burnt the bodies of the constellations. The participant demon king of salvation has killed the helper, scorpion goddess. The participant demon king of salvation has killed the helper, the last pharaoh. The broken heart of the gold dragon couldn't afford the magic power, and the energy in my body suddenly fell sharply. I gritted my teeth and moved. I dealt a blow to Duke Burkan and immediately turned my back to him, striking a blow to the mysterious bird of the Nile. You are overly affected by the character. The excessive use of bookmark can leave a permanent injury on your soul. Meanwhile, the supreme god of light wasn't perplexed at all as he saw me moving closer. I have watched you for a long time. You always borrow the power of other beings. The Beast King's sensitivity wrapped around my body while I prepared to deal a blow with electrification. From the first scenario to the present, you have never fought with your own power. Do you really think you can build up your own story? The history that you've learned is just history that came from stealing. It felt like I was facing hard steel. The supreme god of light used only one of his 4 arms to block the blow from electrification. It isn't yours. The third eye of the god shone as brightly as the sun. At that moment, I realized what stigma Surya had released. The constellation, supreme god of light, is invoking the third eye. My vision distorted and all the light around me disappeared. In the darkness, I felt the edge of this space gradually crumbling. There is no you in your story. Everything around me was already Surya's space. You will die alone. The third eye had the power to control time and space. It was the power of Surya's third eye. I was confused because I didn't think Surya would use this power so quickly. How could I get out of here? It wasn't possible to use electrification and Way of the Wind. The legendary story, Distorting Things as One Pleases, has activated. I didn't know what to read. King of a Kingless World wasn't suitable. Person who opposes the miracle was also ambiguous. The same was true for one who hunted the king of disasters. The space was now reduced to 1 square meter. What should I do? The story, Distorting Things as One Pleases, is screaming. My back was tingling when I heard a sound. It sounded familiar, as if someone was eating a story. Delicious food. I looked back and a small mouth was stuck to my back, eating my story. Kim Dokja is a FOOL. It was the 4th wall. This bastard wasn't going to help me? The torn apart, Distorting Things as One Pleases was now nearly useless and was entering its stomach. I forgot the urgency and shouted at the absurd situation. By the way, the thing that came out of my mouth wasn't a yell. The 4th wall said, "Ku-wa-ah." An explosive burst of sound poured into the surrounding space. The space trembled like it was a living creature and a gigantic crack formed. The stigma, the third eye, is shuddering. I realized what was going on. The third eye was a mental ability that controlled time and space by manipulating cognition. The fourth wall was the strongest skill I had in regards to a mental barrier. The constellation, Supreme God of Light, is astonished. The darkness collapsed like glass breaking. Once the light returned, the first thing I saw was tears coming from the eye on the forehead of the Supreme God of Light. "You, what are you?" The astonished true voice resonated, and the other constellations hurriedly rushed towards me. "You dare, die." My magic power was at the bottom. I didn't have enough power to open bookmark again. Nevertheless, it wasn't necessary anymore. It had been 20 minutes since the game started. The fog of the gorge is thickening. There was a groan from somewhere in the gorge, and the movements of the constellations stopped. The nervous constellations looked at the top of the gorge, and a dark shadow fell towards this side. I nervously slid down a rocky wall. It had been a long time since I saw something like this. The length was 5 kilometers. The body, with a circumference of over 10 meters, was falling towards the ground along with the collapsed upper part of the gorge. The constellations let out warning signals, but the large ones were crushed under the scales of the giant monster. The helper, mysterious bird of the Nile, has been killed by the apocalypse Amugi. The monster burst like a bug and coiled up in the gorge, crying towards the air. The apocalypse Amugi. It was the name of the monster I had been waiting for. Damn. Don't back down. The constellations were overwhelmed by the sudden disaster and started attacking with their stigmas. The one who killed the monster could get a powerful team buff. However, there was no way I could knock it down. According to Ways of Survival, the red dragon of the apocalypse who appeared in Armageddon had the fearsome power to blow up a third of the stars in the sky with a single tail. Quackhack. Of course, this Amugi wasn't at the level of the red dragon of the apocalypse, but there were no constellations who could deal with this monster at the beginning of the game. Quack. The constellations screamed as they were torn apart by the teeth of the Amugi, while those struck by the tail were blown away. The unstoppable system messages were signaling the devastation of the gorge. In a moment, 7 participants and helpers died in the gorge. The surviving constellations escaped from the gorge using the sacrifice of other constellations. Surya's cold voice echoed through the gorge. "You have a wicked trick up your sleeve. However, you won't be able to make it." The apocalypse Amugi struck the constellations and was now looking at me. A red sphere gathered at its mouth in order to dissolve the last insect. The red flames of the apocalypse. It was the fire of judgment that could melt everything on the ground. The plan was okay. Meladin and Burken suffered deadly damage, and the disadvantage of the game was now balanced to an almost equal level. I would have liked to have a bit more strength left. My death here meant we would be deprived of our sentences. I felt regret and emptiness. If we went to the third game, was there a chance for us to win? My eyes slowly closed as dark red flames headed towards my head. The waves of heat enveloped my body, and there was the sizzling sound of rocks melting. Still, I didn't die no matter how much time passed. A new helper has been summoned to the game. I opened my eyes and saw someone in front of me. He wore a neat commando uniform. The soldier with the Special Forces mark on his shoulder was blocking the flames with a huge shield. The constellation Master of Steel is looking at you. He had endured even the hottest hell flames ignition. A captain of South Korea's Special Operations Command. I watched the trembling man swallowing and sighed. How or why? I wanted to ask but didn't say anything. Numerous voices were pouring towards me through Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint, and all my words were pointless. Afterwards, a giant chimera dragon was seen falling from the sky. A new helper has been summoned to the game. I saw the little girl sitting on the head of the dragon and, funnily enough, felt a bit tearful. A juicy. The helpers that Yu Jongyuk called finally reached the battlefield. Chapter 265. Dokja's Story. Part 2. There were a total of 3 reinforcements that Yu Jongyuk invited. Beastmaster Shin Yusung, Steel Sword Li Hyunsung, and Hyunsung SSI. Please take Dr. SSI out of here. Ariadne's web shot through the air and placed me on Lee Hyunsung's back. A woman in a cat suit was running through the sky with the Hermes walking method. It was the incarnation of Olympus, Yusanga. Yusung, fire the breath from a long distance. Continue until Hyunsung SSI leaves. The chimera dragon roared and fired a breath. The apocalypse Amugi screamed like it was quite painful. The constellation Master of Steel has given a great probability to his incarnation. The constellation Abandoned Lover of the Labyrinth is supporting her incarnation. The constellation Master of the Skywalk is supporting his incarnation. The constellations supporting Lee Hyunsung and Yusanga seem to be struggling. Thanks to Yusanga's commands, I was forcibly carried on Lee Hyunsung's shoulder. Lee Hyunsung SSI. Stay still, Dr. SSI. You don't have to do this. I can move now. Lee Hyunsung didn't loosen his hard arms at my words. The only thing he did was silently climb the gorge. Once the top of the gorge could be seen, Lee Hyunsung opened his mouth. Dr. SSI, have you ever thrown a grenade? Grenade? To use a grenade, you have to go through 3 steps. Remove the safety clip, remove the safety pin and throw it. I know, because I've thrown it in the training camp. Then you know how important the safety pin is for a grenade. I realized what Lee Hyunsung was trying to say. I lost the safety pin. Wasn't it the bullet shell last time? I thought that I shouldn't lose it again. Lee Hyunsung turned his head and looked back at me. Once the safety pin is inserted, it must be done well. Soon after, we reached the top of the gorge. At the bottom, Yusanga and Shin Yusung were riding the chimera dragon out of the gorge. I saw Shin Yusung's brightly smiling face and my heart felt complicated. Hyunsung SSI. Yes. I knew what Lee Hyunsung wanted to say. He had been a soldier all his life, so this was the only way he could express it. Thank you for coming. I heard a sniffling sound but pretended not to know anything. After a while, something rolled like an acorn and crashed into my leg. A juicy. She hugged my tattered leg like it was precious. It's been a while, Yusung. Shin Yusung nodded vigorously when her face against my coat. I patted Shin Yusung's back while Yusanga approached. It has been a long time, Dr. SSI. Yes. Have you been well? Well, it was a stupid question. Since the scenario started, no one could be well. You are the same, Dr. SSI. Yusanga's smile wasn't false. Before the destruction of the world and after the destruction, Yusanga was the only one who laughed at my jokes. The others? Only we came. He-Wan SSI and the kids wanted to come as well, but I tossed the coin with Lee Gilyung and won. Shin Yusung interrupted with a laugh. I see. My life was decided by throwing a coin. I stroked Shin Yusung's head and said, Thank you Yusanga SSI. I was just thinking about going. There was a bad sign from Dr. SSI's good or bad luck, disaster, or happiness fortune. Good or bad luck, disaster, or happiness fortune? I knew this skill. There was only one constellation on the Korean peninsula who had it. Yes, it showed great misfortune. Soo-young and I were wondering about who should go when Yoo Jong-hyuk contacted us. I roughly understood what was going on. I didn't think Han Soo-young and Yusanga would throw a coin, so Yusanga probably came because Han Soo-young had a problem. Han Soo-young seemed to be doing well with the job I entrusted to her. Soo-young SSI also wanted to come. Ah, yes. Indeed. It was a lie. She disliked me. Then there was a rumbling sound from a bush. I was so excited to meet my companions again that I forgot the game wasn't over. I rushed through the forest area with the group and asked, Are you aware of the situation? Yusanga nodded. I heard the story from Baehyung. Yoo Jong-hyuk might be playing in the tanker position with Ruler of Amusement, but by now, his health would have almost reached the bottom. The second game would be decided here. The chimera dragon let out a burst of wind and the nearby trees collapsed. The battlefield where the constellations was fighting was clearly revealed. Yu Zhonghyuk. Yu Zhonghyuk glanced this way from where he was surrounded by constellations. You're late. He was still arrogant, but the blood flowing from his body made him seem like he was dying. You. He has a sentence. Perhaps there was a special skill to determine this, as one constellation screamed. Apart from our team, the number of participants remaining was 6. Our side had only 5 people, including the new reinforcements. In addition, Yu Zhonghyuk was in a state where he almost couldn't fight anymore. Go. As the all-out combat began, the constellation set up a formation centered around the founder of humanity and general of Van Era. The first one to run towards them was Steel Sword Li Hyunsung. I won't. Lost. It again. Li Hyunsung flew forward and started to fight with the narrative-grade constellation, Manu. Manu frowned like he was displeased to exchange blows with an incarnation. His powerful status burned at Manu's fingertips, and the steel shell was slightly softened, but Li Hyunsung didn't back down. The constellation Master of Steel is looking at the founder of humanity. The founder of humanity was narrative grade, but so was the Master of Steel. I looked at the thorns of steel transformation rising around Li Hyunsung's body, and I could only guess how harsh the personal scenarios that he completed were. It wasn't a position that more than 10 incarnations could reach. The current Li Hyunsung showed an overwhelming growth potential than the Li Hyunsung of any other rounds. Yusenga watched the scene and also ran forward. I'll take Olympus. This girl, are you crazy? King Oedipus discovered Yusenga. The two of them both belonged to Olympus. However, based on what I heard from Dionysus, Olympus was currently in the middle of a civil war. Master of the Skywalk. You're making the wrong choice right now. I didn't know the exact situation, but it was obvious that a group led by Dionysus and Hermes was trying to be independent from the existing Olympus. Yusenga started fighting with King Oedipus, while Shin Yusung moved the Chimera Dragon. The condensed breath covered the battlefield. The constellations who couldn't avoid it screamed. There are 10 minutes remaining. The second round was reaching its end. At this moment, the points of each team were almost equal. The constellations were desperate. Several constellations headed towards the Chimera Dragon, and the dragon and Shin Yusung were in a crisis. The dragon wasn't able to use its force, because it consumed quite a lot of power when dealing with the Apocalypse Amugi. A hatchling. It is only big. It would be our side that was disadvantageous if this round ended in a draw. The game would flow into the third game, and if we didn't win, we would have to deal with the constellations on a stage where the penalty had disappeared. Yu Zhonghyuk knew this fact and pointed to Duke Burkan. Kill the Duke. He has the sentence. I nodded. I will create a path. Yu Zhonghyuk squeezed out his magic power and used breaking the sky swordsmanship. They are aiming for the sentence. Yu Zhonghyuk slashed and slashed again to create a road. He used his last force to draw a huge semicircle on the ground, and the constellations rushed at him. I'll leave it to you, Kim Dokja. Yu Zhonghyuk was pierced in the heart by Manu's spear. The helper, Yu Zhonghyuk, has been killed. He stood upright even at the moment of death. The constellations turned to me after Yu Zhonghyuk disappeared. The primitive spear and a ray of light headed my way. However, the bombardment didn't reach me. Dokja SSI. Li Hyunsung activated steel transformation to block the attacks of the constellations. The hot heat and shock would be terribly painful, but Li Hyunsung seemed more energetic. Duke Burkan could be seen in the distance. There are 5 minutes remaining. Hyunsung SSI, throw me. It isn't possible. Doing that again. You have to throw the grenade after pulling out the safety pin. I stared into Li Hyunsung's shaky eyes. Even if I die here, I won't really die. The real death was losing this Demon King selection. Li Hyunsung watched for a while before closing and opening his eyes. Li Hyunsung's eyes returned to that of a soldier. I won't believe your lie again. No, now isn't the time to be stubborn. If you die, we will die together. The constellation demon-like judge of fire is greatly pleased. I must do this. Then Li Hyunsung started running with me on his back. Manu was hit by the rushing Li Hyunsung and rolled on the floor like a bowling pin. Hyuk. Cheeky incarnation. No one was able to stop the berserk Li Hyunsung. At least, it looked like that. Proud child. As I said earlier, it is barely history. Li Hyunsung's movements were stopped by a powerful status. The supreme god of light Surya had recovered his strength and was blocking the way. His third eyes might not work properly, but he was still a Lokapala of Vedas. He had the power to stop us. His four arms moved and the entire ground shook as the running Li Hyunsung was pushed back. He tried running again, but the same thing repeated. The place where you are standing now is a place for humans. A human who keeps repeating the same mistakes. I triggered electrification from Li Hyunsung's back. My fist stretched out and struck Surya's torso. Even so, Surya didn't budge. The transparent shield created by the four arms smothered all my attacks. Only this much? Are you really trying to see the end of the scenario? It was the power to deny all the history I had accumulated. Electrification and the white pure star energy didn't work. The times have changed. Only this much history. There was such a gap, despite only 30% of his power being available. What would happen if 100% of the power was opened? Then a new voice was heard. Don't ignore a juicy. Shin Yusung shouted from the head of the Chimera Dragon. The breath poured out at Shin Yusung's signal. Surya swung his arms and scattered the breath. Li Hyunsung leapt through this gap. His steel transformation body collided with Surya. Surya, who had been unmoved by countless attacks, shook for the first time. Yuaya. Li Hyunsung swung his fists towards Surya like a madman. Li Hyunsung didn't stop, despite the steel transformation around his fists cracking, blood splashing, and bones breaking. The 73rd Demon Realm is responding to the will of you and your helpers. A new story about you is being made. The humans' will to challenge a god was causing cracks in the defensive wall. A little break. It was a very small crack that human history created. Hyunsung SSI. Li Hyunsung and I didn't miss this gap. As if throwing a grenade, Li Hyunsung threw my body that had become small through miniaturization. I broke through the barrier created by Surya's arms and rushed to Duke Burkan. Duke Burkan turned his head with surprise while I activated and my side pierced his neck. The participant Demon King of Salvation has killed the participant Duke Burkan. I did it. Along with the triumphant victory, countless system messages flowed into my head. Before I could read the messages, a power squeezed at me. At the last moment, I saw Surya's face. You have died. Chapter 266. Dokja's Story. Part 3. My vision blackened before coming back. It felt like my consciousness had experienced a power outage. I blinked blankly, but only the dark ceiling was visible. What happened? I took deep breaths and moved my heavy head as I started thinking. I was participating in the second round of the Demon King selection. I killed Duke Burkan and at almost the same time, I was killed by Surya. Then the system messages poured out. Did I win the second round? Or, did I lose? I thought about it, but I wasn't sure. You have taken away the enemy's sentence and won the game. I seem to have heard this message. Your sentence was taken away and you have lost the game. I also seem to have heard this message. Maybe it was both. Then which one was first? For now, I had no way of knowing. You have died. The only thing I was sure about was this message. I died in the game and awakened in this place. Ugh. I slowly rose from my seat and the place where I was lying was seen more clearly. Numerous lamps were set up between niches, illuminating the vast darkness. It was an unfamiliar place I had never visited before. There was a sign stating 000-100 in the place where I stood and large bookshelves around the sign. There was the smell of books. It was reminiscent of a university library. Library? Why was I here? I pulled out a book on the closest shelf and turned a page. After Lee Sealwa's death, Yu Jong-hyuk thought he should die many times. He could never win against them with talent and skills alone. The end of the scenario wasn't visible and the power of the constellations was unbelievably strong. Revenge for Lee Jae-hai and Lee Sealwa couldn't be achieved. Yu Jong-hyuk thought in the midst of his despair. The sentences in the familiar style were lined up and I read the sentences as if they were being sucked in. What if I have a sponsor? It was a scene that didn't appear in detail in Ways of Survival. Even so, I knew this scene. It was because the scene was defeated dozens or hundreds of times in my imagination. The constellation wants you to be his incarnation. This was the first time Yu Jong-hyuk received his sponsor. Yu Jong-hyuk in the 0th regression repeatedly trained to his limit without a sponsor but had to kneel in front of the incarnation. A new attribute, regressor, will blossom. It was the story of when Yu Jong-hyuk first became a regressor. I reflexively closed the book and looked at the title. Yu Jong-hyuk, 56th record of the 0th round. I suddenly had an idea of what this place was. As my eyes became accustomed to the darkness, the surroundings looked better. This was the library where all the records of Ways of Survival were gathered. I muttered in a slightly weary manner. It seems to be more than 3,149. Ways of Survival was long, but not to this extent. This huge space was filled with books. I wasn't sure if I could read half the books even if I devoted my whole life to it. Then I got a headache. The curled memories were breaking out like an eggshell cracking. This place that had just seemed unfamiliar now felt familiar. The lamps in the niches and the shelves of books. I slowly got goosebumps and an intense feeling struck my head. I had already come to this place once. When was it? When? Kim Dok-ja. The voice echoed through the library. I knew this tone. The fourth wall? Then the entire library shook faintly. Yo, you are so old was in Dan-G-er. Danger? I called you. The fourth wall called me here. It wasn't difficult to figure out what he meant. Perhaps, are you also in here? Correct. How do I get out of here? Where is the exit? Hey! I called out a few more times, but the fourth wall didn't answer. He was a guy who slept when sleepy, so he might have fallen asleep again this time. I had to find a way out myself. You can't use Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint in this location. You can't use Bookmark in this location. All my available skills were blocked. I couldn't see the end of the library no matter how far I walked. I couldn't see the exit as I looked to the north, south, east and west. I became convinced that I couldn't escape and felt a drug-like comfort. Heaven. Everywhere I looked was Ways of Survival. It was a world full of Ways of Survival. I might have been happy if I came here before the scenario started. It was a story that would never end no matter how much I read. I wouldn't go hungry because I was just a soul. There was no way for me to go out, so I should read more books. I didn't know. There could be a way in the book. I pulled the books out of the shelves, stacked them next to each other, and started reading them. I looked for a while and once again realized that Ways of Survival was Ways of Survival. There are too many explanations. The surroundings were quiet, so the speed at which I read the book was faster than usual. However, I didn't read it roughly. Like a gourmet long-starved of meat, I cut every sentence into pieces and relished them. That jerk, he was cute at this time. Damn, I should have killed him a bit more in the beginning. Some of the stories were already known and some weren't. This information was forgotten. What? There was something like this? There was no one in this place, and I naturally spoke to myself. I wasn't conscious about any listeners. Thus, I read a few more books. There was a sense of pride in my heart and warmth rose. Suddenly, I felt weak. Why didn't I just give up and stay here? It wouldn't be too bad if I never woke up from here. There was no scenario here to kill me. I didn't need to see the constellations. After reading a number of books, I ran past some bookshelves, reading those in the middle. Yu Jong-hyuk sometimes thought this. If I hadn't met that guy on the bridge, what would have happened? Or if I had killed him there, what would have happened to my remaining life? I saw the familiar phrases and reflexively looked at the title of the book. Yu Jong-hyuk, 12th record of the third round. As expected, it was the third round. I opened a few more books, some of them were written about me. Damn Kim Dokja. Some books contained. Kim Dokja, wake up. Kim Dokja. Some good words were written. In some books, nothing was written. The sentences were filtered and couldn't be read. Some of the episodes had blank pages. It was as if the story hadn't been recorded yet. All books were organized in accordance to the order of the rounds. It was as if someone had arranged it so I could find it easily when needed. But who? I just had this thought when I saw something on the other side of the bookshelf. I reflexively put the book back and looked. It was a very short moment, but there seemed to be the shadow of a person. Who's there? The sound of footsteps started heading further away. I started chasing the sound. I almost stumbled over a few books on the floor, but persistently followed the shadow. The signs of the bookshelves changed quickly. From 000-100 to 100-200. Then it was 200-300. Yu Jong-hyuk, 24th record of the 373rd round. Yu Jong-hyuk, 31st record of the 473rd round. Countless books passed by quickly. Yu Jong-hyuk, 27th record of the 573rd round. Yu Jong-hyuk, 12th record of the 681st round. I was a bit breathless and still couldn't see the end of the books. It was obviously a soul body, but I was breathless. I kept running. This was an opportunity. If I missed this person here, I wouldn't be able to catch it again. How far did I go? I was getting a bit closer. Wait. The moment I shouted, the floor in front of me suddenly disappeared. My body failed to overcome inertia and fell forward. I might have fallen down if I hadn't reflexively grabbed the bookshelf next to me. Yu Jong-hyuk, 22nd record of the 1863rd round. Yu Jong-hyuk, 23rd record of the 1863rd round. Yu Jong-hyuk, 26th record of the 1863rd round. Books poured towards me head. It hurt as much as Yu Jong-hyuk's fists. I barely dug myself out of the pile of books and the shadow I was pursuing had already disappeared. Shit. Instead, there was a cliff in front of my eyes. I couldn't see the bottom. I stared down the cliff like I was possessed. This was the end of the library. It was the end of all the stories. I stared at it and felt the urge to throw myself in. I felt like I could know something I had long wondered about. If I could go inside there. The moment my body tilted towards the bottom of the cliff, someone tightly grabbed my shoulders. You will die if you fall. It is really beyond the wall. Slap. 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 Wake up. Slap. 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 Yu Jong-hyuk SSI, stop it. Dokja SSI's face is swollen. What the hell is happening? He is still breathing. I think there was a shock to the soul. Yu Jong-hyuk frowned at Yu Sang-ge's words and stood up. The swollen Kim Dokja was lying on the ground. The bear-like Lee Hyun-sung was holding on to him and crying out madly. Dokja SSI, wake up. Please. The moment the second round was completed, the mythical battlefield suddenly disintegrated. All participants and helpers of the Yu Jong-hyuk Kim Dokja Industrial Complex were left in front of the wastes of the industrial complex. Yu Sang-ge stared at the people standing in the same camp. 2 dogs and 1 pretty boy. Also, Han Myung-go. You were alive, department head Nim. Yu Senga SSI, Han Myungo started sweating and retreated. Yu Senga stared at Jang Haeung. Are you on our side? I. Jang Haeung met Yu Senga's eyes and stuttered in a confused manner. He didn't know how to introduce himself. Then Jang Haeung caught sight of Shin Yu-sung. Weren't you in that video? You know me? Jang Haeung recalled the scenes of the 73rd Demon King scenario, thanks to Shin Yu-sung, and figured out who they were. I'm a real fan. Wow, I can't believe I'm meeting the incarnations of Earth. Jang Haeung's eyes were glowing as he shook Yu Senga's hand. Yu Senga smiled lightly and stared into the air. By the way, did we win or lose? Only one unknown system message was floating in the air. We are currently determining the winning team of the second round. Jang Haeung said, I think Kim Dokja killed him first. Then shouldn't we win? But our sentence was stolen. Yu Jong-hyuk shook his head. Kim Dokja was faster. The words filled with strong conviction caused Jang Haeung and Yu Senga to brighten. It was likely to be true if Yu Jong-hyuk said so. Then a cloud of dust appeared on the other side of the wilderness. It was a scene filled with a powerful status. There were no need to ask about the identity of the incoming beings. Yu Jong-hyuk stared at the sky and his expression hardened. We are currently determining the winning team of the second round. It was still the only sentence floating in the sky. It had been the same for 30 minutes. Be prepared. Huh? Something is wrong. In the main scenario, the fast-paced bureau would never spend 30 minutes to determine the winner. In other words, this situation was intended by someone. Someone didn't want the scenario to end this way. The present 73rd Demon Realm was filled with an enormous amount of probability due to the mythical battlefield. Yu Jong-hyuk pulled out his black demon sword and declared, this time it isn't a game. The terrible roar of the thunder-eating bird filled the sky. The constellations who no longer received penalties from the game were coming over here. Chapter 267. Dokja's Story. Part 4. A strong hand grabbed my shoulders. I reflexively turned my body and punched out. There was a thud and my fist was caught in a big hand. Oh, did you come to fight? The darkness was lifted and a white face was revealed. I saved you once before. You must have already forgotten. It was a face I knew. It was someone I killed. Why are you here? Are you really asking because you don't know? It was an ambiguous face, where it wasn't clear if the person was male or female. It gave me a feeling of incomprehensibility. This presence shouldn't be here. Nirvana Mobius. A long time ago, he was eaten by the fourth wall. What happened to the beings who were eaten by the fourth wall? I had this question from the first moment the fourth wall ate something. It is as you can see. This is what happened. Nirvana laughed. We hadn't met for a while, but Nirvana was just the same as our first meeting. If there was one difference, the letters making up ways of survival was hanging on his body like a shackle. You've been alive here the whole time? It's hard to say this is living. Looking closer, Nirvana's voice didn't flow out of his mouth. I couldn't even say it was a voice. Nirvana stared up at the air. I'm living thanks to that damn parasitic wall. At this moment, the warning of the fourth wall echoed. Near va na talk ing too much. Nirvana laughed. His eyes were bitter, but there was a strange uplifting sensation from him. I followed Nirvana's gaze and looked around the library. There were numerous types of letter forms that made up a world. In this place, everything was ways of survival. Now you know everything you've ever wanted. There is no entity that knows everything. Just like you. Nirvana really seemed like a mysterious sage. I felt strange. For the first time, a character learned the secrets of this world. How do you feel? Now you know that you are a character in a novel. Nirvana's expression changed at my provocation. A novel, is that what you really think? Nirvana looked at me with pitying eyes, and his lips shook several times. However, no sound emerged. I was frustrated. What is it? Finish it to the end. Nirvana smiled quietly. I like your story. I was embarrassed by the unexpected words. To be precise, I like the story you have changed. The sentences that feel your will, the context that contains things you don't say. What are you saying now? I stepped back in an awkward manner. I looked at his bastard and remembered his words before his death. It isn't just me. All the beings here love your story. Who else is in this place? The air started shaking and a few dark shards fell from the ceiling. The vibrations were like something giant was burrowing this way. Nirvana picked up the fragments and frowned. There is no time, so you better move quickly. It isn't good to talk too much here. Something terrible will happen. Nirvana started walking before I could ask anything. I followed Nirvana while looking back at the cliff I had almost fallen off. The vibrations in the library were spreading from the cliff. Wait, where are you going? There is someone who wants to meet you the most. What? Who? It is the existence who organized the shelves from 000. Organized the shelves? We aren't just here to play. If we don't clean up properly, you won't remember it. Wait, what does that mean? You don't need to understand. I turned and saw new bookshelves appearing. The library was really spacious. Ways of survival increased the number of rounds that were skipped in the second half. Perhaps this library had arranged all those omissions. A signpost saying 000-100 appeared in front of me. It's here. Then have a good conversation. I turned the corner and saw a familiar creature. It was the minimum size compared to what I saw in the past, but it was definitely the existence I knew. 12 tentacles were being used to pick up books on the floor. There was a squid-like body controlling those tentacles. There was something like horn-rimmed spectacles placed on a small hole that was presumed to be the eye. You were here. The squid looked this way. The 12 tentacles nodded simultaneously. The poor truth seeker came. It was the Eater of Dreams. In Dark Castle, I defeated it with the help of Chiok Junyong and the fourth wall. He was swallowed up by the fourth wall and ended up in this space. Did you want to see me? I want to help you. Something that was presumed to be the squid's mouth looked pleased. I didn't know how to respond to this different species gesture. I don't know what you're saying all of a sudden. I need some time to figure out the situation. There isn't much time. Why are you trying to help me? With your help, I have reached the truth of the universe. Noble beings will pay back their debts. Noble beings. In fact, it wasn't strange for the Eater of Dreams to call itself that. This squid was strong enough to chew up the constellations making a fuss outside. Then I have one thing to ask. Go ahead. Who created this library? At this moment, huge sparks popped up and my body crashed into a bookshelf. 12 tentacles stretched out at the same time, holding my body to the bookcase. He looked at the falling books and the Eater of Dreams pushed up his glasses. It does not constitute a question. Ask another question. I bit my lips and thought about it. It was meaningless to ask a question related to ways of survival right now. It was possible to read the second revision, and there was a way to come back to this space and read the related questions. In other words, I had to ask a question that wasn't recorded in Ways of Survival. It was also a question that the Outer God had to answer. Finding the question wasn't difficult. Who is secretive plotter? Strong sparks once again sprung up. I was worried that my body would be thrown back again, but fortunately, the sparks were weaker this time. Are you curious about the Great Plotter? The tentacles moved very slowly. He is one of the oldest beings in this universe. I was hearing information about secretive plotter for the first time. The most solitary being in the universe, the one who fights against the oldest dream. How do I know if you were just saying this? Let me know the right modifier. A modifier is meaningless for him. However, he will help you if you want. Help? How? Make an otherworld covenant with him. The otherworld covenant. I knew what it was. In the fifth scenario, the absolute throne that I destroyed was a type of covenant. However, there was never a good end to a covenant in ways of survival. I can't do that. A few tentacles nodded like they were heads. I thought so. You hate higher level beings. I won't be able to create the story I want if I borrow your strength. You are now someone who can't be controlled. I felt strange. I didn't think an outer god would say this. You need to think again about your anger. In order to reach the end, it is necessary to properly consider the things you can use. Do. This world is heading towards. It hasn't been written yet, but it has already been written. The great plotter can help you, so that you can find the right way. I believe in the stories I have accumulated. Do. The gap in vibrations was gradually shortening. The Eater of Dreams spoke like he was resigned to my stubborn will. Unfortunately, there is no more time. Remember that the great plotter is always waiting for you. One of the tentacles wound around me. Meanwhile, the other tentacles moved quickly and started looking for something on the shelves. The book he found was Yu Jongyuk, 38 RD record of the third round. The pages turned quickly. I realized what was going to happen and hurriedly opened my mouth. Wait a minute. I still have something to ask. Goodbye, S-Apostle. If the probability allows it, we will meet again. The pages of the book opened and sentences appeared on the blank pages in real time. Yu Jongyuk had a thought. Wake up quickly, Kim Dokja. Otherwise everyone will die. Damn it, this was why I was forced to leave. The next moment, I was sucked into the context of the sentences. The battlefield was a ruin. Yu Jongyuk wiped his bloody lips while looking at the bodies of the incarnations on the ground and the approaching constellations. The combination of the transcendent dog breaking the Sky Master and the constellation OSU was amazing. They didn't mind their broken bodies and were biting at the rushing great constellations. Thanks to this, Cleopatra in the front was a mess, while King Oedipus had nasty bite wounds all over his body. It was reasonably okay when dealing with great constellations. Disgusting. You dare to call yourselves constellations when you can't even deal with such bugs? However, the narrative grade constellations watching from the rear came out and the situation completely reversed. Shin Yusung's chimera dragon crashed down due to the thunder-eating bird. Li Hyunsung had his steel transformation shattered by the general of Vinara's fist and he was rolling on the ground. Yu Senga was somehow managing to fight despite coughing up blood several times, but this seemed to be her limit. OSU was stabbed by the founder of humanity's primitive spear and staggered to the ground. OSU's incarnation body was stabbed and the Breaking the Sky Master also staggered. They opened the limits allowed by the probability of the 25th scenario. It wasn't 100% power, but the powerful status that the parties present brought out filled the entire demon world with dazzling white sparks. This was the strength of the beings called constellations. They were beings who came from the highest place in this world. Yu Jongyuk asked, "Why are you doing this?" The constellation, Supreme God of Light, is laughing quietly. It looks like you don't have to have the history of being defeated by bugs. Surya's cheeks subtly twitched at these words. The opening of the Locapolis status caused the expressions of the constellations to change. The opening of an excessive force caused sparks to appear around Surya's body. However, Surya looked confident like he could afford it. Kuang. He released his status and dealt one blow. However, the whole area became a terrible mess. The nearby structures were turned to ashes and the fleeing incarnations were destroyed. People collapsed while blood emerged from all orifices. Some constellations are dissatisfied with the progression of the scenario. The constellation Demon-like Judge of Fire is greatly angry. The Demon King Overlord of the Great Demon Castle is pleased. The Demon King Maker of Discord is excited. Many constellations are excited about the great battle. Li Hyunsung was defending in front and blood poured from his ears and mouth. Yu Jonghyuk grabbed Lee Hyunsung's shoulder. Back off, Lee Hyunsung. This is an opponent you can't go against. Lee Hyunsung reflexively tried to say something, but even that seemed hard. Yu Jonghyuk left the faltering Lee Hyunsung behind him and walked forward while wiping the blood off the black demon sword. It was a desperate situation. His sage's eyes was analyzing the battlefield in real time. The number of constellations visible at the moment was almost 20. Some of the great constellations were eliminated from the field, but it wasn't a number he could win against. Young disciple, no. You will die if you open that power. The Breaking the Sky Master instinctively realized what Yu Jonghyuk was going to do. However, Yu Jonghyuk's will was stubborn. Yu Jonghyuk slowly raised his power and huge sparks appeared. He knew he wasn't their opponent. However, it was always like this. Once you reach Transcendence Stage 3, you can gain the power to destroy constellations. The words left behind by his teacher were the only comfort that Yu Jonghyuk now believed in. This time, he was using a shortcut to raise his power. This didn't mean the power was a lie, because he used a shortcut. A dazzling aura burst from Yu Jonghyuk's body. Soft hair poured down like a waterfall while his large size became a smaller and sleeker body. He took the form that allowed him to practice the ultimate Breaking the Sky swordsmanship. Yu Sanga stared at the scene from behind and couldn't help opening her mouth. Yu Jonghyuk SSI? Yu Jonghyuk slowly turned back, his long hair cut off by the black demon sword. The iness of the face had changed, but it was clearly Yu Jonghyuk. No, it was even more than before. Yu Jonghyuk's gaze stayed on Kim Dokja's face for a moment. Take him away. Yu Jonghyuk turned his head and wiped the blade of the black demon sword. The constellations who were laughing at him were approaching. King Oedipus opened his mouth. Foolish transcendent. This is the cost of going against the constellations. You will die here. Yu Jonghyuk replied while still wiping his blade. I guess so. However, some of you will die too. Haha, it is useless. The extinction of an incarnation body. Yu Jonghyuk didn't listen. Instead, he was reminded of Kim Dokja's words. Don't give up on this life. Then in the next life, half of you will die. Yu Jonghyuk's voice rang out quietly through the battlefield. Yu Jonghyuk raised his head along with the black demon sword. The footsteps of the constellations stopped for the first time. The power of transcendence was threatening the surroundings. In the next life, all of you will die. The black demon sword's cry seemed to touch the sky. The expressions of the constellations stiffened as Yu Jonghyuk concluded his words. You will die forever.